Let's begin. So tomorrow is Shiva Asar b'Tammuz. Just a reminder, anyone could thank you for muting yourself. Tomorrow, you don't have to turn off your camera. But anyways, tomorrow is Shiva Asar b'Tammuz. Shiva Asar b'Tammuz. And as one person sent me a message when I posted on my status that no more haircuts, no more shaving starting Shkia about an hour ago. Wait, the 3 weeks are starting now? And I think for many of us, and I'll include myself, that's the feeling that we have. It's Shiva Asar b'Tammuz. Tomorrow, of course, there'll be Slichos. We'll realize a little bit more about what's happening. And in a very short amount of time, we're going to have Tisha B'Av. Of course, we hope, as we always speak and we daven, we hope we won't have a Tisha B'Av. And we hope that instead of sitting on the floor, we'll be flying on the wings of eagles. And we'll standing in the Beis HaMikdash. But we have to realize that we're beginning the process right now. A process that began by Asar B'Tevis. But now, with Shiva Asar b'Tammuz, which I'm sure we know, there were 5 critical events that happened on Shiva Asar b'Tammuz. The luchos were broken, the carbon tamid was stopped, the walls of the Beis HaMikdash were breached, a pastum is burnt to Sefer Torah, and an idol was erected in the Beis HaMikdash. But really, aside for the 5 events, in the global picture, Shiva Asar b'Tammuz signals the start of the Churban. The start of the time period that no one enjoys. No one likes Tisha B'Av. It's just not fun. Sitting on the floor, fasting, mourning, trying at some level to connect to this entity called Beis HaMikdash that we can't really connect with so easily. And that's what's beginning. So let's spend a few moments trying to understand what exactly we are doing. What we're doing, what is this time period, which really is teaching us what does it mean that we don't have a Beis HaMikdash. That's part A. And part B is going to be what perhaps can we focus on to maybe ensure that we don't get there. So let's first explain, why do we want the Beis HaMikdash? I think when we got together last year, right before Tisha B'Av, this was also part of what we spoke about. But let's now, it's earlier, we have 3 weeks. We have 3 weeks to try it a little bit to connect. What exactly do we need the Beis HaMikdash for? So Shimshon Pincus, we've been learning a lot from Rav Pincus, whoever's been learning the Sharon B'Tfilah together with us, or listening afterwards, and I think we're all starting to appreciate a little bit the incredible majesty of Rav Shimshon Pincus. He says something which is so simple, and I think it's something that in the year 2023, in our world, we connect with even more, perhaps, than he connected with many years ago. And he says, you know why we need the Beis HaMikdash? Because you know what we're lacking? We daven, we learn, we do mitzvahs, we have shuls, we have bati midrashim. What we're lacking is the feeling. We're lacking that we don't feel close to Hashem. We're always trying. What are we trying to always do? We're trying to create that closeness. We're trying to feel that spark. We're trying to touch that neshama. What are we doing when we sing, when we daven, when we get together, when we learn? What are we really doing on a very deep level? Is we're trying to bring out that neshama from within us, which means we're trying to touch, to connect, to feel Hashem. And if we think about it, it's mind-boggling. We daven every day, and we learn every day, and we do mitzvahs, and we do chasadim, and we spend money on being a yid. And yet, how many of us walk around and we don't feel Hashem? We just don't feel it. We'll put on our tefillin and we'll daven and okay, and we'll sit and we'll learn a little bit, or we'll hear a shir, and we'll do a chesed and we'll give tzedakah. Do we feel it? Do we feel Hashem? Or is it, okay, we did it, almost like a checkbox? That feeling, that is what the Beis HaMikdash will bring to us. Because right now, where is the Shekhinah? Unfortunately, the Shekhinah, of course, is in the shuls. Of course, is within the Dalet Amos of halacha. But the Shekhinah is not palpable. It doesn't have a home. The Shekhinah Hashem is lacking its home base. So in a situation that the Shekhinah is lacking its home base, it's hard to feel that. So when we have a Beis HaMikdash, says of Shimshon Pincus, you know what the first and most incredible thing that's going to change? Is we're going to feel Hashem in our lives. And if we take a moment and appreciate that, just imagine the same tefillah that we daven this morning, the same mincha is going to be a different world. Why? Because that mincha, those words of tefillah, will create a connection. We'll feel Hashem in our life. And I always remember my Rebbe Ray Brown, he always says, you know why we need the Beis HaMikdash? Because we all learn. Baruch Hashem. But the learning will be completely different. We'll be on the level of the Tanaim, of the Amarayim, of the great Tzaddikim. Many of us last week get together at the Rimnitzer Kever. Just imagine, we'll learn the same Torah, but we'll be elevated onto the level of the great Tzaddikim. Why? Because when we're living, when Hashem is in our life, in our midst, when the Shekhinah has a home, then everything is different. The tefillah is different and the Torah is different. And we, therefore, will be completely different people. So the first reason why we want the Beis HaMikdash and why we want to, for the next 3 weeks, try to connect, try to feel. And anyone who's listening now or will be listening afterwards clearly wants to try. Okay, maybe the few people who are on live, you're doing it to, be nice to me, and I appreciate it. But anyone who's going to click on it and anyone who's actually listening right now, what does that mean? That means you want to try. We want to understand. We want to realize, what does it mean, no Beis HaMikdash? We want to come to the realization how life will be different with the Beis HaMikdash. So really the first reason why we want to live a different life for the next 3 weeks is for ourselves. For us. Because we're going to be different. We will be elevated. We'll be on a different plateau. Our davening, our learning, our chesed, our connection to Hashem. We'll feel Hashem. Our neshama is going to be on fire. When you walk into the Beis HaMikdash, it's a different world. We've spoken many times how Shabbos is at some level like the Beis HaMikdash. It has different rules. And we try every week to recreate that. But with the Beis HaMikdash, it will be there in the flesh, in the reality. So the first and foremost reason why we need the Beis HaMikdash is we need that feeling. We crave the relationship. We desire so deeply to feel close to Hashem. The biggest proof that we desire that is that we're still trying. That we didn't hang up the cleats. How often do we daven and we don't feel it, and we learn and we don't feel it? So if we're still trying, that means we want it. We want to feel it. And everyone knows that there are times that we do feel it. And it's such an exhilarating feeling. Such an incredible feeling. Whether it's a davening, whether it's a holy moment, whether it's going beyond ourselves, giving tzedakah or doing a chesed. But at all those moments, we feel it and we want to continue feeling it. And that's the first reason. And in truth, as we always say, we could stop with that. And we should all try, and I know this is what I'm going to try to do, is spend a few minutes thinking about this. Letting it digest, letting it hit home. How everything will be different. How we personally, in our own physical, mundane lives, will feel completely different. As we'll feel the visceral, flesh, physical feeling of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in our lives. And the second reason, says Rav Shimshon Pincus, is for Hashem. Whether we can fully appreciate this or not, but again, in today's day and age, probably even more so than 50, 60 years ago, the Chil Hashem that goes on, the world that lives defiant, just trying to find new ways to show they don't care. It's one thing if you don't care, but to show and find new ways to show how we as man control the world, as we as man don't need a God, the chil Hashem, the lack of kavod shamayim. And when there's a Beis Hamikdash, I'm sure we've all heard of Gemaras and all learned Gemaras and different Midrashim, how even the Goyim will be different to us when there's a Beis Hamikdash. A guy could bring a carbon if you could imagine such a thing. The whole world will be different as we as Jews will be the epicenter. We will be the world. The Beis Hamikdash will be the hub. Hashem will be the God. So the second reason why we want Beis Hamikdash is because we want it for Hashem. And again, whenever we want something for Hashem, it's always difficult because we're wanting something as we can't fully understand it. But a little bit, we could try to appreciate it. We could think about it. How would the world be different when Hashem has his home? So that's why we want the Beis Hamikdash. So what are we going to do about it? And really, there's no one answer. There are many answers. We all know the different Gemaras, different Midrashim, whether it's the Bein Adam L'Chaveiroi, the interpersonal relationships that cause the destruction, whether it's the lack of importance to Torah that caused the destruction. And each area is a real area. And probably the reality is that every area is important. And if everyone would do something more for the next 3 weeks, if every Jew would spend the next 3 weeks saying, I'm going to do something to bring that Beis Hamikdash back, we got the realization why we need it. We understand that we want it for ourselves to feel Hashem. That we want it for Hashem. How's the whole world needs a God, needs a reality that there's Hashem there, that there's a Shekhinah there. So if we were to do something every single day for the next 3 weeks, Yudam Shemona Esrei, Uvenei Yerushalayim in benching, every time we mention Yerushalayim, Beis Hamikdash, if one time a day for the next 3 weeks, for 21 days, if we spent one time when we mentioned Yerushalayim, when we mentioned Beis Hamikdash, when we mentioned HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we mentioned Hashem, when we said thank you Hashem, if we took a second to think, wait, what will be different when there's a Beis Hamikdash? If we all did that for 3 weeks, and if the whole world of all the Yidden did that, not necessarily focusing on one particular area, probably that would bring Mashiach. Again, no one's to know. But probably, because what does Hashem want from us? He just wants us to want. We all know we're sitting at the end of days. We all know that the Mashiach is at the door. It's no secret that the world cannot exist this way that much longer. And it's no secret that the temptations that are nowadays are so insane that any Jew that's still a God-fearing Jew, that anyone that's still trying, the level is beyond. So now we just got to drive it home. Now we just have to bring it home. So I want to focus on one area, and I'm going to preface, and we have to be honest, I don't know if this is the area. I thought about this because this came from last week's Parsha, and I found it to be a very powerful idea. I found it to be a very relevant idea. And I found it to be an idea that in today's day and age is something that unfortunately is very difficult. And many struggle with. And that's why I want to hone in on that idea. But again, I preface one more time. And anyone who clicks out now after 14 minutes, if you heard that for 3 weeks to spend a moment of thought about Beis Hamikdash, that's great. That's amazing. That's not just amazing. That's beyond. Just to think, I want to connect with Hashem. The Chadush Yarim. I'll get back to a moment what I was about to say. The Chadush Yarim writes, there's one tefillah that Hashem can't say no to. Powerful line by the Chadush Yarim, the Ger Rebbe. Chadush Yarim writes, when one davens to be a Talmid Chacham, Hashem can't say no. How could the Chedush Rebbe say that? So I heard a simple explanation. Because if you're davening to Hashem to want what He wants, of course He has to give it to you. Because that's what He wants. So you're just asking Hashem, give me what you want. Allow me to do what you want me to do. So of course, it requires hard work. And of course, without trying, you're never going to get there. But in a similar vein, what does Hashem want? He wants to bring the Mashiach. He wants the Beis HaMikdash to come back home. He has no greater desire than that his children should be back and really be His. And of course, the Mishalim, the ideas, we've all heard all of them. About the sick kid that was sent away to get better. Because in order to heal, he has to build up his immune system. And every year when he's supposed to be reunited with his parents, the doctors say, no, you need another 6 months and another year. And after time and time, the child starts to lose the feeling for his parents. But the parents still long for their child. And every year they try again. And one year the doctor says, okay, you can come home. And the last minute he says, stop. And the next year the child comes all the way to the door. The doctor says, no, he's not healthy enough. And every year more and more. And even though it goes on for so long, but the parent never loses the desire. The child slowly loses the feeling. But the parent always wants the child back home. And that's HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Hashem always wants us to come back home. And Rav Shimon Meir Silverberg says that this is what's going on right now. Hashem wants us. He's waiting with bated breath, with open arms. All He wants is to try. So that's first and foremost. But I'd like to focus on one idea, an idea that Rav Hutner brings down in this past week's Parsha. I'll say the background quickly and then I'll focus in on the theme. Bilam curses Klal Yisrael. Bilam curses Klal Yisrael, and one of the curses he gives is that Amalek, you were the first to contend with Klal Yisrael, so you're going to be the first to be destroyed for eternity. Something that we all know, that Amalek has to be utterly obliterated. And if you've ever thought about it, why? What did Amalek do so wrong? To be destroyed, I understand. But why for eternity? What was so terrible? And I think we all know the basic idea that Amalek, since they were the first, they opened the door to everyone else to Klal Yisrael, which is for sure true. But there has to be something deeper. And Rav Hutner says, you know what's deeper? He quotes a pasuk in Mishlei, Yotes Chav Hey. I think a friend of mine who sent me this vart, Yisrael Teitelbaum. Rav Hutner says, the pasuk in Mishlei says, late takei. The late, the scoffer, shall be hit. And he explains in a very deep way, you know what Amalek was really doing? By being the first to dive in, they were acting in a form of leitzanos. What's leitzanos? Let's appreciate this for a moment. Leitzanos, mockery, jokes, is something that is the most destructive thing in the world. Jokes also can be the most incredible thing in the world. To laugh, to smile. We've been spending the last, I don't know how many shurim, when we speak about tefillah, talking about thanks and simcha, and how terrible being despondent, being depressed is. That's for sure true. But the power of a joke, the power of leitzanos, we all know you could walk out of a shiur, it could be 1,000 people, and everyone could be moved. And there's that one guy that makes that one line, boom, pop the balloon, the whole thing's out. The leitzanos, the mockery. It could be a ne'ilah. We're standing there, the gates are open, we're at that final Hashem Elokim. We're clean, we're pure. And maybe you walk out to the bathroom. One moment before that last Shema Yisrael, and that guy makes that silly joke to you. Totally destroys the whole thing. Says Rav Hutner, on a very deep level. You know what Amalek was? Leitzanos. They said, Klal Yisrael. We could dive in against them. That's how he explains the medrash that says they dove into the boiling hot bath. He says it's the koyach of leitzanos. Now this is something that when I was thinking about this, it hit home very hard. Because we all know how Leitzanis, jokes, and certainly in the world of social media, in the world of text messages and WhatsApp, how one line, one word could destroy everything. It's venom. It's poison that just slowly drips in, and it could just infect and destroy everything. So if we're trying to figure out, why do we want the Beis HaMikdash? We want to feel close to Hashem. We want Hashem to have His home. What do we have to do? We have to realize the power of our words, of course, and the power and the destructive nature of our words. How one word could literally destroy the world. How one word could make someone lose a job. How one word could make a person who maybe is finally on the right path. Maybe he finally started to show up to davening on time. Maybe he finally started to listen a little more at Kriyas HaTorah. Maybe he finally started to have a bit more kavanah. And that one guy that makes that joke, that one guy that cracks that line, it just, all that hard work just deflates. And it could just destroy so much. And that's the destructive power of Leitzanis. And it could really come, and it could destroy our Brata Midrashim, it could destroy our shuls. This is really the depth of what it means talking by davening. It's not just talking by davening. Talking is one level of issue, but Leitzanis, to make that jokes, maybe it's not in the shul, maybe it's outside, but that joke, when someone's trying to daven, someone's trying to connect, someone's trying to feel Hashem, and then someone makes that joke, the whole thing is out the window. So one area that I wanted to focus in on, and then we'll circle back around, because this is one area that maybe someone will say, okay, no. Maybe we shouldn't say no. Rabbeinu Yonah writes that those that mock the Gedolim, that those that make fun of the psakim of Rabbanim, those that belittle the words of Rabbanim, Rabbeinu Yonah writes that that's the final and like the last list in Gehenim. We don't like using these scary terms of Gehenim and it's the worst and things like that. But if we appreciate the power of Leitzanis, and in today's world, we all know, quoting this rabbi said this, and this one said this, and everyone has an opinion, and everyone knows everything. And then when the Rav, the Rabbanim, a group of Rabbanim come out and say something, what do they know? They don't know anything. What just happened? What just happened? What just happened? To tell you if your pot, when the milk splattered in, if it's kosher or not, that we can trust the Rav. But when it comes to something serious, how can we do that? So the answer is, it comes from Leitzanis. It comes from an attitude. And the whole world is this way, and that's why it's so difficult. An attitude that, just nothing's a big deal. The whole world is not a big deal. So if the whole world's not a big deal, then nothing's a big deal. Then we could just make fun of and destroy everything. And it's so destructive. It could destroy people, it could destroy marriages, it could destroy homes. All for the sake of nothingness. Because that's the power of Leitzanis. So, I'm going to wrap up what we said, and I'm going to end with a story. Story is slightly unrelated, but it's related in many different ways to different areas that we've been speaking about when we speak about tefillah, areas that we've been speaking about in general. So that's why I want to end with this story. But let's first just wrap up what we're talking about. That as we're preparing for Shiva Asar, a long fast, a difficult fast, as the 3 weeks begin, the lack of music, the lack of haircuts and shaving, which will eventually come to Rosh Chodesh Av, which will increase the mourning as we slowly start to feel even more as we get to Beis HaMikdash. Lack thereof, the lessening of showers, the lessening of laundry, the lessening of simcha. Mima'atin b'simcha, Shulchan Aruch says, it's halacha, that those 9 days we're a little bit sad. We're not sad in a depressed way. We're not sad in a not well way. We're sad in a way that we want to be back home. We just want to feel Hashem already. We have to start to realize, why do we want the Beis HaMikdash? We daven all day. So now let's understand, we mentioned Beis HaMikdash so many times in our tefillos. Every time we bench. So what are we doing? What we're doing is, number one, we want to feel Hashem. Imagine how incredible that will be. Take the greatest time you've ever felt connected. The greatest shmooze, the greatest shir, the greatest tefillah, the greatest kumzitz, the greatest song, the greatest rebbe, the greatest moment, that moment that you felt, wow, elevated, exhilarated, connected to Hashem. That moment is going to be the reality of everyday life during the time of the Beis HaMikdash. If that doesn't make us all want the Beis HaMikdash, how incredible is that? That loving embrace. Sometimes you think, a child falls, and the kid could be really hurt. Mommy or daddy, tati, mommy, abba, ima, picks up the child, gives the kid a hug, the kid calms down. And sometimes if you think about it, it's wild. The kid's really bleeding. The kid's really hurt. Yet when mommy holds the kid, when daddy holds the kid, the child feels that warmth, feels that love, and it could actually make the pain less. That's the embrace of a father. That's the connection. That's an iota, that's a dot. That doesn't even touch what a real connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu is. That feeling, that's going to be when Beis HaMikdash comes. That's going to be the reality of the entire world. And number two is, for Hashem's sake, look out in the world. Look at the insanity. Look at the insanity. You don't have to go anywhere. Wherever you go, you see the insanity of the world. And when Hashem has a home, that insanity will no longer be there. The rest of the world will be subservient to us, and they'll realize how Hashem chose us as His people, and how He is running the world. And we continued by honing in on one detail that Rav Hutner brought out in last week's parsha. The Rav Hutner taught us that why does Amalek need to be so destroyed? Because they have the midah of leitzanis. The midah of leitzanis, the venomous, destructive, terrible power of a joke, of belittling things. And we explained that the depth, this is why we have to be so careful about our words, about our messages, about our posts. How we could say one word wrong about someone. How we could see someone do something and we'll just make up a story. How can we do that? We can destroy someone when we do that. How careful we have to be with leitzanis. Late ta'akeh. No one would want to be in that boat with Amalek. That's going to be destroyed for eternity. And we're going to conclude with a story. An incredible story. And hopefully we'll be able to tie together many different things that we've been speaking about with this story. We'll make the story a little bit shorter. The hour is late. The story is of an almana, a woman that her husband died. And throughout Shiva, as we all know it, what happens throughout Shiva, different people come and they tell stories of the deceased, and it's a very comforting feeling for one sitting Shiva. And this woman and her children are sitting there hearing such incredible stories about her husband. He was a carpenter, and he would fix tables, but people would say how they'd bring him everything, and he would fix it, and he would say, yeah, pay me tomorrow, pay me next week. And of course, they never paid. And that was just his way of allowing them to not pay. And stories, how he always overextended himself, how people would come just to talk to him. And people would come and he would even lend them money. And a very comforting week of Shiva. But Shiva ended, and guess what? There were lots of bills, because her husband was a tzaddik. Her husband didn't make anyone pay, but there's one problem. Problem is, how is she going to pay all the bills? And she had nowhere to turn, because no one ever assumed that she needed anything. Why not? Because her husband always was giving. So if someone's always giving, you assume she doesn't need anything. And month after month goes on, and no one's coming to her help, and she is destroyed. And the whole first year of Shiva was an incredibly difficult year for her. And the year ends, and as is the custom on the art site, she goes to the kever. She goes to the kever and she's crying and she's davening with her children. She tells her children, I need a moment. And she sits there and she pleads with her husband in Shemayim, and she says, please, I'm hearing all these incredible stories, but you have to help us. I can't pay the bills. And as every good story goes, as she turns around, there's a man standing there, a well-dressed man, and the man says, is this the grave of so-and-so? And she says, yes. He says, oh, great, I'm coming to light a candle at his kever. And she says, may I ask who you are? And the man says, how are you related to this man? She says, it was my husband. The man says, I must tell you, I knew your husband for 10 minutes and it changed my life. And he proceeds to explain how a year prior, he was diagnosed with a terrible illness. And he was in the hospital, destroyed. And he says to this woman, I'm not Shomer Shabbos. I haven't davened in 67 years. I was approaching my 80th birthday. I hadn't davened since I was 13. And I decided, I got this terrible news. I'm going to go and I'm going to daven. So I found the shul in the hospital. And I walk in there and it's silent. No one's there. But then I hear from the front. I hear by the paraiches. I hear someone talking. So I listen. And there's a Jew standing there. And his head is buried in the paraiches. And he's sitting there and he's crying. And he's saying, Hashem, I just want to say thank you. You've given me this incredible illness, which is killing me. But I'm so grateful now for the fact I could talk and I could breathe. And the man proceeds to list every faculty that now that he's so sick and about to die, he has come to appreciate. And this man, this well-dressed man who's telling the almana, says, I'm standing there listening, blown away, as the man is conversing with his father, with Hashem, thanking him, how he doesn't care about the petty life anymore. And the conversation that this man had with Hashem ended. And the man says, I wanted to go over that man, but I couldn't bring up the courage. But I saw him get into the elevator and go to the 3rd floor. And my room was also on the 3rd floor in the hospital. So I went up to the 3rd floor and I tried to bring up the courage, but I couldn't do it. And every day I wanted to go over to that man and talk to him, but I couldn't get the courage to go talk to him. A week later, I finally built up the courage. And I went to his room and I asked the nurse, where's the man that's here? The nurse said, who? And he said, the man that's in this room, I need to talk to him. And the nurse, with a tear in her eye, said, he was just nifter this morning. So this man turns to Almana and says, I knew your husband for 10 minutes, but he changed my life. I've come to have a relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, with Hashem. I've started davening again. I don't have much time to live, but I'm slowly coming to appreciate everything that I have. And with that, he says goodbye to Almana and he lights the candle. And the Almana goes home and again feels very comforted. Still no money. And as every good story ends, a year later, when this woman goes back to daven again at her husband's kever, she comes back home and she receives a registered piece of mail. A piece of mail made out to her name. A whole long legal document. But the letter says, just skip to number 14. That's what's relevant to you. And she skips to 14 and it says, there's $4 million that's been left for your 4 children from this man who was just nifter. With a little note, how her husband changed her life. I felt this story was very apropos because we're talking so much about how we thank Hashem in the right ways. How we're coming to appreciate everything Hashem does for us. We're learning about Rina, about Shira, about singing, about thanks. But as we spoke about tonight, why do we want the Beis HaMikdash? Because we want that relationship. And none of us should ever have to come to the moment, come to the time of a terrible illness to realize how much we need Hashem. We have Hashem in our lives. We have to just start opening our eyes. So b'siyata d'shmaya. Hopefully over the next 3 weeks, we'll take a moment every day, 1 moment, and think why we need the Beis HaMikdash, why we want that closeness, why we crave to be closer to Hashem. And hopefully b'siyata d'shmaya, Tisha B'Av won't be Tisha B'Av. It will be the yontif that it's meant to be.